we have this internal conflict that is actually threatening rule of law and the adherence to the Constitution. It's entirely possible that people with different views, they will go to different places and they will fight. So that I'm a global macro investor betting how the world's going to go. 1971, the United States had paper bills that were like checks in a checkbook. They didn't have any value. But what they would do is they'd get you gold. Because the U.S. wrote more checks than it had gold in the bank, the gold was going down. And on August 15th, 1971, I was clerking on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And I watched Nixon said, they're not going to get you gold. So it defaulted. And I went on the floor of the stock exchange. And I said, wow, this is a crisis. And I thought it would go down on the stock market, and it went up a lot. And so I researched it, and I found that on March 5th, 1933, the exact same thing happened. Roosevelt announced that they were not going to get the gold, and that they would go off that, and that they would print a lot of money. And they printed a lot of money. And what I realized at that time, and saw many times since, that anything that surprised me may not have happened in my lifetime, but happened before. I studied the Great Depression. Because I did that, I was able to anticipate the 2008 financial crisis. We made a lot of money in the financial crisis because I understood what happened in the Great Depression. So in this case, three big things are happening that never happened before in our lifetimes. And the last time they happened was in the 1930 to 45 period. And those three things are the creation of a lot of printing of money to pay for the debts. We needed to at the time, but it was very overdone. We actually sent out checks which were about 5 times as much as the amount that would have compensated people for their losses. Where'd they get the money from? The government borrowed the money. Who did they borrow the money from? The Federal Reserve. What they did is the Federal Reserve prints the money and they buy the debt. And that's how it works. So now everybody gets all these checks and everybody's happy because they get all these checks. But when they get all this money and then they spend it, everybody's surprised they got inflation.
Make Social Security solve it. We should strengthen Social Security. We can do that by making sure the wealthy pay their fair share.
Right-wing extremists want to take funds from our public schools and send them to unaccountable private schools. I'm glad Governor Tony Evers is standing up to those who try to defund public education in Wisconsin. With everything that's going on, it's great to know Governor Evers is fighting for our kids.
Making sure the wealthy pay their fair share. We need to make sure that billionaires are paying more into this system. Now, the senator goes on about the deficit, but he had no problem blowing a $2 trillion hole into the deficit by passing the 2017 tax bill that gave $215 million in tax deductions to his biggest donors in a single year. And he wants to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block.
Was determined by coin toss. And with that, let's begin with the first question from a member of our question team, Kim Murphy from WITI in Milwaukee. Now you're seeing her picture. Despite her hard work, she can't be here because of COVID protocols. So she's asked her teammates to present her questions for her. So with that, let's go to Dale Ryman of WSAW in Waukesha for Kim.
Thank you, Jill. Good afternoon. Good evening, gentlemen. We want to start with the topic of marijuana legislation. This news just coming out yesterday that President Biden is pardoning thousands of Americans convicted of possession of marijuana under federal law. He says it's a dramatic step toward decriminalizing the drug and addressing charging practices that disproportionately impact people of color.
Thank you. There's agreement on both sides of the aisle that something about our country's immigration system needs to change, but how is the sticking point, especially given the unemployment rate in Wisconsin? By the year 2030, it's estimated that the working population in our state will shrink by 130,000 people if we don't have an increase in migration. Would you look at making a path to citizenship more accessible?
I'm going to check with the jurors, and if anything changes, we'll let the parties know. But otherwise, plan on being here at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Radical Tim Michaels supports the 1849 law to ban abortion in nearly all cases. Michaels Foundation funds companies that use cell phone data to track women when they go to Planned Parenthood. Tim Michaels is too radical for Wisconsin.
It's Chevy truck season, and with a $1,000 accessory allowance, it's time to make it your own. Find new roads at your local Chevy dealer.
Being here at 8 a.m. tomorrow.
Will there be an interpreter?
I won't know. We'll do that off the record. I don't know if Dawn Walden out of state or not, but if not, we'll contact her and we'll be in touch with you very.
Schizophrenia or psychosis. So I just want to talk a little. Everyone, so today I want to talk to you a little bit more about a bit more of a contentious issue around drugs and schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, particularly around marijuana or cannabis use and how it triggers or what effect it has on triggering psychosis or schizophrenia. So marijuana just recently became legalized here in Canada, and I know it's legalized in various other parts of the world too, and it's becoming more and more popular in terms of how much people are using it and whatnot. And with this is coming a lot of it data and cannabis use. I've kind of only started to dabble with it since it became legalized a year ago or so. So my experiences with marijuana use have been a little bit mixed, but have been kind of trending towards not so great. And so I kind of wanted to share some of my experiences with how I've slipped into psychosis with the use of marijuana in order to kind of better educate people on what the potential effects of smoking marijuana with a susceptibility to schizophrenia, or if you already have schizophrenia, what the risk factors can be or what can potentially happen if you do that. I want to share my experience to hopefully encourage others to maybe not dabble with it or to just be really cautious if they do. So when I first started trying marijuana about a year ago or so, it felt good mostly. And I understand why people with mental health issues particularly gravitate toward using substances like marijuana, because it can really help to alleviate some of the stress and burden that you feel from some of your symptoms. And it can really help to kind of numb or to just kind of soften, I guess, the symptoms that you're experiencing. And it can be really helpful in that regard. And so I was kind of looking to Rob to be like, are you experiencing this too? Like, what is happening? But it didn't seem like he was experiencing this either. And from what I understand, most people who smoke marijuana or substances like this don't have this kind of experience.
Yeah, look. He's just trying to attack people.
I know. They can get violent, lashing out at themselves or at strangers, picking fights with parked cars, damaging property.
He's dangerous, though, he is.
He's dangerous, absolutely.
They're often oblivious to the risks they take, climbing barefoot under a high bridge, literally rolling around in traffic on a busy street. The drug makes the heartbeat accelerate so high, the internal body temperature sizzles, so stripping seems like the best way to cool off. Who knows what inner impulse then makes somebody want to jump between cars. The inaptly named drug bath salts is suspected of being behind all of these strange and scary incidents.
Did you take the...
make Social Security solvent. We should strengthen Social Security. We can do that by making sure the wealthy pay their fair share. We need to make sure that billionaires are paying more into this system. Now, the senator goes on about the deficit, but he had no problem blowing a $2 trillion hole into the deficit by passing the 2017 tax bill that gave $215 million in tax deductions to his biggest donors.
He thought he was a king, moving like a pawn. Did not have any friends that owned any railroad station, any airport station, any property, any just like little small things. And everybody now running for a piece of the American pie.
With you very quickly so that we can tell you if that witness needs to come back tomorrow or another day, because it might not be her. They could turn to one of our other interpreters. Okay. For the record, I have received exhibits 1, 3, and 5. With that, the state may call its next witness.
Thank you. The state calls Erica Patterson.
Puget Sound, Chesapeake Bay. They are America's great coastal estuaries, and they are in peril.
I would put Puget Sound in the intensive care unit. The situation is critical.
The Chesapeake Bay is like the canary in the coal mine. It is an indicator of what we are now learning to expect in any body of water across the planet.
Illegal condemns, man. We had a few little interruptions. Price of the machines, the big ones or the little ones, and they open now from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. I'm Reverend Eagle Cadiz, man, trying to get you in the rhythm now of the Lord. I got now drums. I mean, his heartbeat. If you got a heart in your body that pumps the Lord's blood that we drink from the Redeemer cup of fresh is obsolete. It just don't exist. That kiss ain't a kiss from the kisses which we kiss, but oh my, we got a problem. So Reverend Eagle Cadiz, man, found the little merch. So he said he didn't build this foundation with the resources that's left in the land, like rocks and bricks and all type of trash. So he said he didn't build a sign with the existence of clean slate days. They say they want to clean you up. They want to dust you off so you can try again, rookie. You want to try. I mean, don't care how many times you fail, rookie. I don't, rookie. I love you. Me, rookie, I love you, rookie. Care how many times you fail, rookie. I was a professional student. I was a professional loser. You loser. I don't care about you. I love you. Reverend Eagle Cadiz, man, rookie. You gonna take this grain of salt, you gonna eat it, you gonna taste it, and you gonna love it. So Reverend Eagle Cadiz, man, said he found some resources on the ground as he was fantasizing about his rich building that if he wanted to put up 20 stories, it's got to be 20 or better. It's got to set new precedents. We doing. We got to make the news as being like the people that saying, hold on, we was poor, but now we bounce back so cold, and we was caught up in a generational curse, but now we done with that. We got some lawyers on deck. We got generations of students studying how we can keep our city developed, and then we gonna go redevelop other cities.
Isn't it bullshit that some companies make their employees work in dark, cramped conditions? Is that good for business? At Vital Farms, we believe happy employees are good for business. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
For the rest of their life solely because they can't find a place to live.
There's a lot of people who want this population to be isolated that think that isolation equals safety.
Like, I'm sympathetic because she was victimized, but I'm not sympathetic in the sense of taking responsibility for something I didn't do.
What do you think about the argument that the registry stigmatizes people who are trying to get their lives back together and maybe makes the community less safe?
I'd say don't commit sex offenses if you don't want to be on that registry.
There obviously is an ongoing campaign by some radicals to basically indoctrinate your kids in their version of sexual values. The biggest problem is that this sort of radical position is becoming quite mainstream across the land. You're seeing public school educators who have decided that if you teach your kids traditional biblical values with regard to sexuality, for example, that this is a form of indoctrination and that you are a bad parent. That if you don't teach your kids about gender fluidity, that if you don't teach your kids about the exact moral equivalence between different forms of sexual activity, and this means that you are somehow depriving your children. And this has driven the radicals to new depths. Today's story, courtesy of Daily Wire, parents in New York City's elite private Dalton School have come out in force against videos dealing with the topic of masturbation that were shown to their first grade children. Parents who sent their kids to the $55,000 a year school have bombarded the school with complaints about Dalton Director of Health and Wellness Justine Ang Fonte's curriculum, the New York Post reported. Fonte showed 6-year-olds a cartoon during her sex ed class that featured small children discussing touching themselves because, quote, it feels good. Here's what that cartoon sounded like.
How come my penis gets big sometimes and points up in the air? That's called an erection. Sometimes I touch my penis because it feels good. Sometimes when I'm in my bath or when Mom puts me to bed, I like to touch my vulva too. You have a clitoris there, Kayla, that probably feels good to touch the same way Keith's penis feels good when he touches it. But have you ever noticed that older kids and grown-ups don't touch their private parts in public? They don't? That's right, Keith. It's okay to touch yourself and see how different body parts feel, but it's best to only do it in private.
I mean, first of all, I just have a question. And that seems kind of judgmental to me. I mean, so long as they're teaching kids about masturbation in first grade, I don't see why it should only be in private. I mean, shouldn't we learn from the innocence of the children? I mean, truly, if you're on the radical left and you believe that this sort of stuff should be taught to the children, why? I mean, really, isn't that why are you teaching them shame? Are you kink-shaming these children? The bizarre perversity of teaching this to first graders is beyond me. But let's be real about this. I don't think sex ed should be taught in public school classrooms at all. I think they should be learning biology. Like basic human biology would be good. We have schools that are churning out kids who don't know basic reading or math.
Hi, I'm a public school teacher. I fear this controversial framework.
What's your name?
I'm sorry, Brenda Lebsack. Thank you. Can I start over my time? Perfect. Okay. I'm a public school teacher, and I fear this controversial framework will jeopardize thousands of teachers' jobs. I teach in a district that is decreasing in enrollment. This framework could cause an exodus out of public education. I have shown my educational peers the book Who Are You?, which says kids can be both genders, using the pronoun they, them, or theirs, or neither gender. Teachers are shocked and appalled when they see and hear this. They are also afraid. They are afraid that they may be forced to teach concepts that go against their conscience because they believe these concepts are harmful to children. They are afraid that if they refuse to use non-binary neutral pronouns suggested in the framework, such as they, them, or theirs, they could be accused of discrimination and lose their jobs. Reject the framework will save teachers' jobs. Thank you.
Looky what I got.
Is that the new iPhone 14 Pro?
Yep, with this amazing new camera. Smile!
And you got it on Verizon.
iPhone 14 Pro on them. You should get one. Wow, you can hustle.
Get a new iPhone 14 Pro on us. And get it with one unlimited for iPhone. Only on Verizon.
Sex education is an economic justice issue.
We could have kids learn more in school if we raise standards.
We understood our curriculum, and we were basically thrown a curveball.
I don't think the wages match sort of the level of expectation of the position.
Teachers literally. Sex education is an economic justice issue.
We could have kids learn more in school if we raise standards.
We understood our curriculum, and we were basically thrown a curveball.
I don't think the wages match sort of the level of expectation of the position.
Teachers literally have the future of the country in front of them every day.
How would you solve this equation? For most of us, it's as simple as following a series of familiar steps to get us to that answer. Now, remember this. This is how students under Common Core were taught to solve the exact same question. First adopted in 2009, Common Core was an ambitious initiative to revolutionize the American education system. 41 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories signed up to participate. National leaders from Bill Gates to President Obama supported the idea of the Common Curriculum, and it cost an estimated $15.8 billion to implement.
They thought standards were just too low in the U.S. and that we could have kids learn more in school if we raise standards. Quite frankly, they didn't really trust the schools to do this on their own.
One of the most challenging aspects was we understood our
like the work of Dr. Thomas Sowell to reach more people, please don't forget to like this video. If you are not yet subscribed, please do so. To get beautiful citations for free like the one you find on the screen, visit the website for more information. Let's begin.
Gilda points to the study recently released by whatever foundation it was, showing this dramatic rise in single-parent black families, and also their failure during the past 10 years to keep pace with white families, and on the contrary, how black families with 2 parents have done so well. That was the Sowell thesis. But he blames welfare for this. Do you blame welfare so much for that? How does welfare cause a black father to desert his family?
Well, part of it is desertion, but part of it is that the family never existed in the first place. When you're talking about teenage girls who get pregnant and never had a man in the house, well, not living, you say, there's not even a question of desertion.
Well, when the figures rise as dramatically as they have done, by 15 percentage points, what is it that's happening now that wasn't happening then? Just plain more sex, more teenage sex?
Yes, that's happening, I think, in society at large. Part of the general degeneration of standards in American society.
Would a corollary of your proposition that the more we engage in affirmative action, the less we succeed, be that the more we teach sex education, the less we learn?
Oh, absolutely. That what is amazing to me is how many propositions there are that are sacred without a speck of evidence and in utter defiance of all evidence. That sex education was promoted on the grounds that this will reduce illegitimacy, teenage pregnancy, which I think is more important than the legal status of the children, and it would also reduce venereal disease. And of course, it was instituted, and teenage pregnancy and venereal disease have shot up through the roof. I haven't seen practically no one say, let us reconsider this. We have become wedded to certain non-empirical propositions that no matter what happens, these doctrines are so, and they're not to be questioned.
So that if we don't
first speak to us about what we're all interested in, which is the next election. It's coming up sooner and faster. We're talking more and more, but it's called Key Issues in the 2022 Midterm Election.
Detect this. Living with HIV, I learned I could stay undetectable with fewer medicine.
Right to my interview with Bill Clinton. I met the former president at the Clintons' home in Chappaqua, New York. He was gearing up for the Clinton Global Initiative, which starts Monday. This used to be an annual conference, but hasn't been held since 2016. The 76-year-old Clinton is energized that it's been reborn, and he's energized, as always, by American politics. President Clinton, pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you. I'm glad to be back. When you look at the midterms, do you think because of abortion and because of the passage of a few very important bills, could Biden break the historical pattern of the,
After humiliating defeats in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin told his people that the U.S. is bent on destroying the Russian homeland. On Wednesday, he drafted 300,000 reservists and threatened nuclear war. This is not a bluff, he said. Ukraine dominated this past week's annual gathering of the UN General.
Day wars are not just limited to armed conflicts. They can be fought in other domains as well. Our cover story tonight is about one such battle. This story is about oil. This week, OPEC Plus decided to slash oil production. OPEC Plus is an alliance of major oil producers. The objective behind the cuffs is clear. OPEC Plus wants the prices to rise. And there is one superpower that is going to feel the pinch more than the rest: the United States. Saudi Arabia has rejigged oil prices for all regions.
So, will Democrats defy political gravity and hold on to the Senate this November? Just a few months ago, political strategists were predicting a bloodbath for Democrats in this year's midterms after President Biden struggled to handle a slew of crises and his approval ratings sank to historic lows. But Biden has recently had a string of victories. Nevertheless, a Politico Morning Consult poll from this week shows just 42% approve of the job that Biden is doing. Maybe the polls have not yet caught up with the wins. But while experts are saying Republicans still stand to retake the House, they aren't so sure now about the Senate. And even the Senate's top Republican isn't particularly bullish on the GOP's chances.
I think there's probably a greater likelihood the House flips than the Senate. Senate races are just different. They're statewide. Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome.
So what if I need a new policy? And what if it's confusing, like jazz, like ba-ba-doo-ba?
At State Farm, we're there for your what-ifs.
Oh, ba-ba-da-da-da-da.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or click to get a quote today.
Over a month away from the midterm elections, and control of Congress is on the ballot. 538's election forecast shows Democrats are slightly favored to keep control of the Senate, while Republicans are slightly favored to win the House. But there is still time for an October surprise to shake things up. ABC News political director Rick Klein joins me live now for more on that. Rick, inflation and the economy are key issues this election cycle. Are Democrats vulnerable there?
100%, and they're very concerned that the OPEC Plus decision to try to take down production is going to mean a spike in gas prices. This has been something that Democrats have been able to trumpet a bit. We're hearing it around the country that people are still concerned about high prices, and this is the overwhelming issue. We're seeing it pop up in polls and race after race. Democrats on the run and increasingly concerned about that being a drag.
This election night from our NBC News election headquarters. Decision Day has arrived all across this country. Today, by the millions, Americans stood in line to cast their ballots as we now select a new president. The candidates themselves have voted, and already tonight, the very first
Martha Washington burn all of her letters. Kinda. Martha Washington did after, during her last illness. We have an account from Jared Sparks, who's one of the first people to try to publish all of George Washington's letters, where two of Martha Washington's granddaughters informed him that...
Here's a look at some moments in history from the past week. On October 4th, 1927, Gutzon Borglum started sculpting Mount Rushmore. Mr. Borglum chose the 4 presidents to be depicted because he believed they represented the most important events in U.S. history. The monument was completed in October of 1941. October 4th, 1957, marked the start of the space race, with the Soviets launching the first man-made satellite, Sputnik 1, into low Earth orbit.
You are hearing the actual signals transmitted by the Earth-circling satellite, one of the great scientific feats of the age.
The Hart-Celler Act of 1965 was signed into law by Lyndon Johnson on October 3rd. The immigration law changed the immigration limits to be based on hemisphere rather than national origin.
And this measure that we will sign today will really make us truer to ourselves, both as a country and as a people. It will strengthen us in 100 unseen ways.
And on October 7th, 2001, the war in Afghanistan began, with the United States and allies conducting Operation Enduring Freedom. Here's a look at some moments in history from the past week. October 1st marks the 132nd birthday of Yosemite National Park. An 1890 act of Congress made it the third national park in the United States, expanding the wilderness President Lincoln had protected 26 years earlier. The park encompassed nearly 800,000 acres of wilderness. Also on October 1st, in 1946, the Nuremberg trials of leading Nazi officials culminated in 19 of the defendants being convicted and 3 acquitted. They were found guilty of charges that included crimes against humanity and peace. 12 defendants were sentenced to death. Here's a look at some moments in history from the past week. October 1st marks the 132nd birthday of Yosemite National Park. An 1890 act of Congress made it the third national park in the United States, expanding the wilderness President Lincoln had protected 26 years earlier. The park encompassed nearly 800,000 acres of wilderness. Also on October 1st, in 1946, the Nuremberg trials of leading Nazi officials culminated in 19 of the defendants being convicted and 3 acquitted. They were found guilty of charges that included crimes against humanity and peace. 12 defendants were sentenced to death.
Nuremberg stands as a warning to all those who plan and wage aggressive war.
On September 26, 1960, Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy Jr. became the first presidential nominees to debate on television. Mr. Kennedy won the presidency weeks later.
In 1981, we started a brand with no idea where it would take us. We used the forests, deserts, and mountains for inspiration. The elements can be extreme, but the goal has always been simple. Create the best outdoor clothing that elevates your experience outside. Clothing and gear that lets you find your limit and push past it. Through innovative materials, feedback from everyday athletes, and a spirit guided by the outdoors, we've come a long way. In 1981, we didn't know where we were going, but we've arrived here now. Outdoor Research. Trusted gear for you to thrive outside.
The day of the general election, he's restless all day long. He's been so familiar with disappointment that he just fears something bad will happen. About 9 o'clock, he and Judge Davis and the friends go to the telegraph office to hear the returns coming in. Finally, midnight, the word comes in that New York has gone Republican. Then the church bells ring, people gather in the streets. This new guy had won. And then he runs home, as he says, to tell Mary, and famously says, "Mary..."
Into the Civil War, with both the North and South tired of fighting, Abraham Lincoln faced re-election. His popularity had declined so much, his own Republican Party considered nominating someone else for the 1864 presidential bid.
Casualties were at their highest rate in the entire war. There was a lot of war weariness in the North, and Lincoln by August 1864, thought that he wasn't going to be reelected. He actually thought he was going to lose because in the North there was this growing sense that all this loss of life, etc., had been without result.
The war had divided both parties. A hardline faction of Lincoln's party, called the Radical Republicans, accused him of going too easy on the South. At the same time, an anti-war faction of the Democrats, called Peace Democrats, claimed Lincoln was too eager for blood. They demanded a truce with the Confederacy. Finally, the Democrats decided to nominate Andrew McClellan, a war hero. Lincoln's pro-war supporters from both parties formed a new party called the National Union Party. They chose Lincoln as their candidate, but paired him with pro-war Democrat Andrew Johnson for vice president. And in the fall of 1864, Lincoln's fortunes changed as dramatically as the war itself.
Eventually, with the capture of Atlanta by Sherman, it seems to turn the tide in the war. Lincoln is, of course, reelected by a very large margin.
He relied heavily on the bayonet vote, troops home on furlough or voting from the front. Lincoln's victory was the Confederacy's loss. Southern desertion spiked after Lincoln's re-election, as the South abandoned all hope of winning the war.
Are books missing from the shelves of my kids' classrooms? It should not be a political or partisan game. And when it is, it's the kids that suffer.
So Black Lives Matter released their 990 IRS filing. They collected $80 million. Where is that money?
It's not here. Everything looks worse than it was.
Where have you seen that money impacted throughout the city?
So my producer just sent me a link. It is just shocking to me because of how much money was raised to think that where he lived, the bills weren't being covered.
Super frustrating, but that's a dead end, where it gets really interesting. Ready for some BLM pride? Another $200K went to escorts, BDSM workers, strippers, peep show workers, phone sex operators, and webcam performers. And then I thought, not only am I going to say the truth, I am going to scream the truth louder than you can scream the lies.
It's incredible that the majority of the world hasn't seen this.
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History. Who knew that a presidential election could directly lead to war? The 19th presidential election in American history took place on November 6th, 1860. Hey, that is my birthday! Well, if I was alive back then. Anyway, yeah, this presidential election was kind of, sort of, okay, it was a big